Hello, Rei Caldombra here for the Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic anime final review. So back with the wrong way to use healing magic for its last section, which is episodes 10 to 13, focused on the large-scale battle with the demons and its aftermath. So for this part of the story, it was a mix of great, good, and just okay. The large-scale size of the fight is portrayed kinda well, but does fall a little flat in some parts. There's some really great stuff, particularly with the character focus and the main fight, but there's also moments that are just fine and arguably disappointing. The large scale size of the fight is not executed super well. It's shown very well when the characters are running around saving people, where we see how much time it takes to get around even for the super fast rescue team members. But if we'd gone more action outside the Black Knight, this could have been portrayed better. And moving on to the fight with the Black Knight, I think it was a solid fight, but nothing like spectacular that you could say like really stands above when it comes to action. For Kazuki and Suzune's part of the battle, we get to see some good analysis and planning from them on how to take down the Black Knight. It's a shame that they didn't get to do any notable real damage, but seeing the fight play out was entertaining. Since we saw the future where they're dead on the ground, it did not end up being nearly dead on the ground. It didn't end up being too surprising. With Usato's side of the fight, the healing punch is a return to the fun and unique application of healing magic that's been my favorite thing outside of Rose about this anime. I like that it was as simple as a punch while healing, so the enemy just takes the impact damage of the hit, which will whittle them down physically and mentally without doing lethal damage. So this is a really fun and creative way of avoiding Usato having to kill anyone or do any kind of blow that could be considered lethal or cause permanent damage. The execution of this is another spot where the show is refreshing because we do not need a long speech or argument about the ramifications of killing and why Usato won't do it. Instead of humoring that, we see exactly why he does not need to kill and understand his character well enough to understand why he chooses not to. Usato does come in and pretty much win with little struggle, but I am okay with this because of how much we did get to see of him struggle in the series. This is what all that torturous training was for, and it's satisfying to see this work out really well. This is also a case where we get a strong application of the healing magic, where it completely invalidates a type of magic that most fighters would lose to. There's also some really awesome visuals in this fight too. You can see more screenshots in the actual blog post, which is linked in the description. So one point that I really wanted to talk about is that I do not agree with the argument of Usato being a standard, bland isekai protagonist. I do not agree. We get to see a lot of his emotions and opinions on display that keep him being an engaging character. We see him cry and be vulnerable with people multiple times, showing his emotional side. We see his more jokey side when he spends time with Suzune, making friendly jabs and insults rather than just laughing along with her antics. He gets very angry and aggressive when it comes to Rose and the other rescue squad members, which we usually do not get to see from the more chill and neutral type of character that Usato would fit into. These aren't exactly novel character traits, but here we actually see these traits exhibited by him rather than just being told these traits exist, like can tend to happen with very poor character writing, especially in, your bland, lazy isekais. This anime does a better job with showing rather than telling, which a lot of anime, like you just mentioned, isekai especially, can struggle with. I really like Usato crying at the end of the battle. The emotions of all this just come flooding out once he gets that moment of relaxation and relief. I appreciate that despite his bravado and profession on the field, he was terrified. The show even goes out of its way to remind you that a 17-year-old is young and should not be witnessing people die. Anime as a whole is very guilty of treating bloody battlefields like they're just a casual day for high schoolers with superpowers and magic. So it's nice to see recognition of this. That yeah, he's just some high schooler who has people's lives in his hands. So that would make someone really scared and stressed. So it was really nice to actually see that be properly looked at. And on that topic, Rose's affirmation really does hit you in the heart. And Usato's overjoyed that he not only got through it, but succeeded in having an impact. This calls back to his motivation of wanting to be more than an average person who doesn't make a difference. And this fits into why Rose believes strongly in him. I've already mentioned plenty of how great of a character Rose is, and the relationship she has with Usato truly feels special. Despite all the brutal training, they have a very supportive bond. I feel the show is great with showing characters openly being emotional and not portraying that in a negative light. With the end of the last episode, we got to see how much someone having great expectations from him means. I think great being the word rather than good actually has a really strong meaning to it for someone who struggles with believing in their self worth. Often in the real world, we feel like our efforts are not recognized and do not make a real difference. We see that Usato is happier here because he does get that recognition and validation. He was given a role where he can see the tangible positive effects of his efforts, and that's something in real life a lot of jobs don't really give. He may not be a deep or complex protagonist, but I think he has plenty of personality, and I greatly enjoyed following him. And on to another general overarching topic of the show. To me, this is less of a straightforward action show, where I would say the fighting itself is really not the main point. The point is what's happening around the fighting and what it means for the characters. So if you are looking at this anime or the manga expecting mostly action, then I see the point of how it's disappointing. But I can see how it may not live up to expectations after how long it took to get to this moment. I don't have issues with the pacing personally, but it was pretty slow. I can understand people dropping off in the middle section, which seemed to have happened based on the viewer numbers and ratings. I like that we had time to build our characters before they get thrusted into true life and death battles. I could also understand the great opening, which has a big emphasis on the fighting and has that more intense energy, could make someone think it had more action. One place I do agree with the action related disappointment is over the second huge snake monster. The second fight with the snake basically happening off screen is a real shame. It would have been cool to see how those two and the knights had to fight the snake differently due to not having immediate healing, because Usato wasn't there. They specifically said they didn't need him there. They couldn't afford to tank hits the same way Usato was able to in his fight with the first snake, especially with the fast acting poison. This could have been an awesome fight, giving us a new experience with a similar enemy. The giant snake also could have been a way to better show the scale of the battlefield. Imagine it swings its tail and we see a huge space in the battlefield get emptied, with soldiers being flung into the air. In total, we basically got two legit Usato fights, the first snake and the Black Knight, one legit Kazuki and Suzune fight, the Black Knight, and one legit Rose fight in the flashback, with some minor action scenes every so often. So if you went into this series expecting multiple serious fights, like constantly, I can understand if you thought that was disappointing. And that seems to be how some people felt. I really do think we could have used that second snake fight, and ideally something like a practice fight between Kazuki and Suzune. But I can accept it as it is, and I still did enjoy it for what it is. So you read my other things, action is not, and you can kind of see it here too. Action is never really the main priority for me when it comes to enjoyment. So because all these other aspects of it, like the magic system and the characters are really good, I still thoroughly enjoyed this. But for someone who is really into fighting, that's their main priority. I can understand if someone was disappointed. And I am planning to read the manga, so I'll also be looking forward to upcoming fights. And I do think having big breaks between these fights did allow them to have more impact. Because we didn't have any of these large scale, serious, true life and death fights very much, it gave more impact to the moments of this big fight at the end. Usato had his fight with the snake where, yes, he was absolutely in danger, but we did know by the end that Rose was there watching. So she would have prevented him from dying. So with hindsight, we know that wasn't a true life or death fight, even though for Usato it absolutely was. And that was also early on. So I think for the small amount of fighting we got, I'm basically just trying to say that I think it was well paced. I think it was well spread out. Yeah, I really like these characters, so I really didn't mind the slower moments where we got to just spend time with them. These moments are when the comedy is very solid. I love the last episode for giving us a lot of this, returning to the warm and calm tone that the show primarily keeps itself in. We get more time spent with these lovely characters. The characters really are where the series shines the best outside of the healing squad stuff. So I'm glad that we got to spend this time in episode 13, even though it would have been nice. Still, I really wish we got the snake fight. Everything with Fell, aka the Black Knight, is really great. Fell is super cute. I'm a sucker for cute demon girls who act tough, like her, Shamiko, Satania, etc. And this also sets the tone that we can expect redemption in this story, which very much fits with healing magic being the main focus. About characters figuratively and literally healing. Because they're giving her the chance to change, is giving her a chance to figuratively heal herself. Just like how Usato has been succeeding in pretty much everything he's done by literally healing himself. It was also smart to use her as a way to have Usato's training go full circle, by having her being brought into the rescue squad. We get callbacks to what Usato went through at the beginning of the story, which is great because I think the first few episodes were excellent, while giving Usato the chance to do some of the teaching himself. Like especially the moment of Usato giving Fell a diary that's so sweet and just perfect. And when it comes to the side characters, I really want to point out the king. He is pretty irrelevant, but there's this one point that I really like about it. From beginning to end in this season, the king was never a jerk, he was never corrupt or anything along that lines. He was just a good, solid king doing his job who seems to genuinely have the best of intentions. This is very simple, but this is so nice when the usual medieval king in most stories is always a morally bankrupt character who often exists just for the main character to clash against and eventually oust, so the main character can be some amazing hero who stops corruption and can potentially even take the place. And usually there's no subtlety, and the king is just a major asshole right out the gate, which makes it even more annoying of a trope where they're just generally not well written characters, in my opinion. This is another time where this series is refreshing while just being very simple. There's no amazing writing concerning the king. All the show is doing is just not doing stale, obnoxious tropes. And that, sadly, just that being that simple is a good thing. Just being that simple, that is very nice. The king being a good guy also further supports the cozy, warm tone that this series has. So I did not compliment the overall designs yet, and I think they're very good. I especially love Usato's outfit. It's a simple design, but looks really nice. And maybe it's just me, but the Black Knight's armor with the cape the whole design it tries so hard to be dark and cool that it does a full loop around from being cringe to actually succeeding at being really cool. I think it's genuinely pretty rad. Black and red armor pretty much always goes really hard. So you could say it's such stereotypical evil, edgy character design, but I don't know. I love it. It really works for me. So it's been interesting to see the variety of responses to the show. From thinking it's boring during its calm moments to thinking those calm moments are the best part. I think this is a case of action favoring people and the slice of life favoring people both being present and vocal for this show. I think both camps are pretty valid in their praises and criticisms. I think it's a case of people not knowing what to expect from the action side of the show. I'm in the camp of thinking the show is at its best when it's building its characters and world. I think the show can do solid action and drama, but it's at its best when it has a lighter tone. I'd rather the action be a break from the peaceful stuff rather than the other way around. I don't think the quality of the action that we got was as disappointing as some people felt, but I totally understand the point that the quantity of action was not enough. I love the mundane stuff in training, but again, this is looping back to what I mentioned before. But yeah, I did want that second snake fight, and I would have been okay with some of the content in the middle part of the series being cut down in exchange for that. So I really enjoyed this final arc, but the more dramatic scenes to me don't have as great of execution as the more wholesome scenes do. I recognize why the show did not click as well with other people, but it did really click for me. When I have the time, I do plan to check out the manga, and I would absolutely watch a second season. I'm very interested in seeing the world building we'll be getting and continuing to see these wonderful characters grow. Thank you very much for listening.